Kia ora no tātou. Firstly, thank you for not all getting up, because really, how the hell am I going to top a speech by the great Taucha tree of New Zealand rugby, Sir Colin? Big shout out to you. Homai te paki paki. I arrived and our CEO said that this was a focus on unity. And someone cheeky at the door said, Shane, we wanted you to talk about unity. You survived a 9-year political career in the Labour Party. You know everything we should not do. Firstly. Secondly, I don't know if any of my old colleagues are here from the Sea Lord Board or the Aotearoa or that sector of the Māori fishing industry, but my comments will be curtailed. And I acknowledge the presence, I think, of Sir Peter Talley here. I fear that saying the wrong thing, given he's the last one standing fishing up in the Pacific, will ruin what's left of my night. But greetings to you, Sir Peter, and your knighthood. And let me begin not by going through slides, talk a little bit about the role. Number one, this is an industry I love. This is an industry that enabled me to gain some great skills, which I sought to put into practice for those 9 chaotic years I was a Member of Parliament. It's an industry that supported me as a Member of Parliament. A number of you probably didn't realise you'd enjoy the level of scrutiny the media visits upon people who donate funds. But it's also an industry where, unless those of us in Aotearoa are united, it's easily demonised or stigmatised. I'm in an area where, for example, I think our, let's say $1.4 billion Kiwi dollars is the worth of our turnover as a New Zealand fishing industry. The industry up in the Pacific-wide is $5.6 billion. The earnings from those Pacific Island nation states that we call our neighbours and friends is about $3.8 billion. Contrast that against the wealth of our fishery. It is an inordinately large fishery. What actually challenges it is the fish move along the equator, and they do not stay conveniently in one jurisdiction. How does New Zealand deal with that? Well, other than endeavour to keep in regular contact with the diminishing number of industry players in New Zealand, we spend over $500 million a year in international aid, a significant proportion of which goes into the Pacific. The first organisation that is supported through your tax dollars is the Fishing Forum Agency. It has the forlorn and often hopeless task of getting 19 different governments to agree as to how they should conduct their fisheries affairs. I felt I was suitably prepared for a role in that regard, given for a period of time I chaired the Fisheries Commission, which had 72 iwis. And they proved that the Bible was right with a little bit of variation. Where the Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, God is present. You knew where 2 or 3 iwis were gathered, lawyers, conflict, and court cases were in large supply. So I had that background. The challenge, as those of you who have fished up there will know, is that how do you actually get people to not only observe the rules but enforce the rules? And New Zealand can only do so much, because at the end of the day, those enforcement decisions are taken by those small island nation states. In order to fish up in the Pacific, they don't have quota. They have a licensing system which is called the Vessel Day Scheme. And as Sir Peter would know, a Vessel Day Scheme works on the following promise. Whether you catch fish or not, it costs you $10,000 to purchase a day, enabling you to enjoy the entitlement to go into the sovereign waters of these island nation states and catch either skipjack, yellowfin, or the diminishing number of big eye. Now, what is driving that price? It's certainly not the willingness of the New Zealanders to pay, and neither is it the value of the spot price of tuna when it's sold to the canneries. What is driving that price is the willingness of distant fishing nations such as Taiwan, such as Philippines, Indonesia, to a certain extent America, Korea, Japan, and in terms of the pelagic fishery, not really China, a willingness on their part to continue to meet the price expectations, and it'll go, in my view, from 10,000 to 12,000. The difficulty, and you'd understand this as fishing executives, it's disconnected to what you're being paid in the market. And my fear, quite frankly, is that over time, our New Zealand interests could see ourselves priced out of the harvesting sector in the Pacific. I think that would be a very bleak day, given that where we go, we take the hard-learned experience of having a credible fishing system in our own land, in our own waters, and it's very rarely seen on a regular basis in the Pacific. There are several organisations that I no longer go to their meetings because their meetings are worse than the huis I used to go to in Kaitaia. I have since left those huis to Hone Harawira. The first one is the Pacific Tuna Commission, where the distant fishing nations, the bureaucrats, the scientists, the government officials are meant to meet and agree on a set of rules and agree on volumes. Folks, it's consensus-based, so not a hell of a lot is ever agreed to. But the reference to me going to China is that recently and I have to acknowledge people in the industry who helped make my trip a success on the commercial side, but the challenge is to go to the people who are driving the decisions coming out of China. Now, at one level, you might say a visit by me as my capacity as ambassador is an exercise in naivety, but I'm not from the school of thought. Well, number one, I'm not paid to actually get into the politics of stigmatization or demonization of anything to do with China or any other ethnicity. But they were very keen to receive me and said the following. Number one, we are not particularly big in the pelagic fishery. Your offer to work and learn from the experience of New Zealand and to achieve better sustainability outcomes, we acknowledge you coming here. No one has ever asked us did we want to work with them ever before. And there's just a reality, folks, and we probably don't fully appreciate it. The geopolitical influences sweeping through the Pacific are large and real. China is not going anywhere. I have chosen in my role to find common areas of interest to actually work with them. Initially, they were going to subsidise the building of 400 vessels to further harvest our tuna fishery, and I say our because it's just north of New Zealand, not very far from the Kermadec. That's where they settle like mosquitoes in a fetid swamp. They have now agreed that they will reduce that 400 to 200, but the challenge is how to get them to collaborate with us as New Zealand industry people, or in my case, the ranks of the ambassadors in the international fora. And that's not going to happen by constantly complaining, bitching and moaning about them. But this is only a 3-year gig, so 18 months has gone from this. Funnily enough, my term comes to an end early in 2017. And at that point in time, I'll determine what I might do. The other challenge really comes from the quality of the science. We have a great system in New Zealand. A challenge for those of you thinking about the Pacific is that the science is carried out by an organisation we also help pay for, called the South Pacific Commission in Noumea. At the end of the day, however, the decisions driving the allocation of licences do not happen in New Zealand. They don't happen in large multinational bodies. They happen within the governments of the Pacific. And on a regular basis, I go around the Pacific, not necessarily challenging, but being straight up and searching for honest responses from the very governments and countries that we work with. Critics of the role have said, well, Shane, why are we funding these people if they're not actually doing everything that we want them to do? We don't fund all of them inordinately at a high level, but it is a challenge dealing with a sovereign country who I learnt the hard way in trying to get all the iwis to agree. The first thing you know is that they will not agree. And it's no different when you go along the equator, whether it's Nauru, Kiribati, etc., but it's a constant struggle and a constant challenge. Papua New Guinea has a profound vision, wanting to create 20 new manufacturing plants. Each plant would employ about 2,800 people. and they want to establish nigh on 20 of them. I've invited them to come down to New Zealand so they can see why we no longer process as much fish as we used to in Dunedin. There are some economic realities as to why fish processing has moved to other parts of the world. Solomon Islands probably has the most effective fish processing plant, a single place where the actual local people, the tangata whenua, crew the boats, catch the fish, process the fish, and they have a fully integrated, successful model. The largest and probably most well-known brand to some of you people in the audience is Tri-Marine from America. You'd know some of those executives. They're in a hell of a state in American Samoa at the moment because the access that used to be available to their boats is no longer available. So they're having to capture fish and move it from a long, long distance and still process it at a time where prices are stagnant, etc. If there is a bogeyman in the whole of the Pacific fisheries, and a number of you would know who it is, it's Thai Union. They are large, they are powerful, and they have the ability, in my view, to influence price behaviour. Funnily enough, the EU, the European Union, a number of you factory managers would have suffered the indignity of a visit or three from the European Union, I've no doubt. It may not surprise you, they are doing the same thing around the Pacific. I wait with bated breath to see how strong their hand will be against Thai Union because they are so big and powerful. They have a system, if you're really bad, they give you a red card, it's good night Irene, you can't sell fish anymore. They give you a yellow card, so it's like half pie, and then you go through an enormous amount of regulatory compliance. New Zealand sends some specialists there, one chap that Francesco Blaha, who you'd know of, the Argentinian guy, was with Sanfords in the past. He's doing a great deal of work up there. But when my back is turned, there's no way to know whether everything that we are pushing as outcome is actually being delivered upon. So why is this relevant to us in our neck of the woods? Well, our tuna fishery, for those of you who have caught it and still process it, whilst it's not as significant as the equatorial resource, it's still a very, very handsome resource. It's something that we can continue to make money out of, we should make money out of. And those of you who are thinking about following the pathway of formerly Vaughan Wilkinson, who probably was our most knowledgeable out of the industry for the ins and outs of the industry, now followed by Captain Andy, and Peter Talley would know that the thing standing in the way of Kiwis going up there is make sure we've got the necessary licenses with a cost structure that enables you to ride through the lows as the dairy industry is doing at the moment. It won't permanently stay low, but if you're going there with stretched balance sheets without enough equity in your business, stay home and get that problem for free. That is the reason why many are falling by the way. The businesses coming out of Korea, Taiwan, are admittedly subsidised in a nefarious set of ways, but they have very, very strong operating balance sheets, etc. Just to wind up, the big events that happen up in the Pacific, one big event is coming up. It's called the Pacific Leaders Forum. If you've ever thought about going to such an event, don't. Not only will it look like paint drying, they're not for business people. They're for the bureaucracy and they're for the political leaders of the country. Although I must say this year I have supported an event, a private enterprise event, as an adjunct to the Pacific Forum Leaders event up in Papua New Guinea, because Papua New Guinea is a country much larger than ours geographically, with a population of about 7.8 million people, with an enormous endowment of both marine resources and terrestrial resources. And a number of your business colleagues from engineering and a variety of other such firms are up there doing very, very well. So that's the major event. The purpose of that event is for the leaders to seize themselves of critical issues around the whole Pacific, and I have managed, with lots of support from Murray McCully, we've managed to get fisheries as the central agenda item this year at the Fishing Forum Agency, and have the leaders of the Pacific embrace it and say what they mean and mean what they say. Of course, Western Papua otherwise known as Irian Jaya, I think, Western Papua also is an issue that might loom large, and that's just the challenge of politics. A potentially media sexy issue like that could easily overshadow what is the most substantial critical resource. I say it again, well over $5.5 billion worth of tuna, well over $3.23 billion within our Pacific neighbours, the Pacific countries that belong to the Forum. How much do they make? By the Vessel Day scheme, they get about $350 million per year spread across about 18 countries. So do the maths yourself, 3.4 divided by 320 million, it's not much more than 9 or 10%. Most of the fish is taken and processed elsewhere. In the small amount that is processed in the Pacific, the challenges are if the boats can't get regular access to licenses to keep those factories functioning, it's going to be a big challenge. Look, I've got only one other thing to say, that this year I caught, certainly in Northland, the largest blue marlin. It was 365 kilograms. I went out on a boat, Sir Colin. A guy said to me, "Hey, Matua, Shane, can you come out on our boat? You're wandering around the Pacific talking about fisheries, etc." I said, "Oh, okay, what are we going to do? Go sword fishing." Fine. Went out there, and God only knows how it happened. I happened to be sitting in the chair when this monstrous taniwha of a blue marlin chomped on the bait. When we eventually got it in, the hook was lightly embedded in the cheek. The line was wrapped around the bottom jaw. We got it in. The first thing that happened, after the media just happened to hear about it, the first thing that happened is that radio commentators in the north started to complain that the fish had not been tagged, had not been released. This pissed me off. I said, "I'm from Kaitaia and we choke and smoke." Kia ora, thanks.